Okay, welcome everybody to the. So I need to change the. Let's go, but the share. So I think you see some weird effect. So it is not intentional. So welcome to the third lecture of this year's Shanghai lectures. Today we will have the basic lecture that I will give until 5:10. Then we will have a presentation from the students of Shanghai University of the Northwestern Polytechnic University in Shanghai, China, very appropriately on the Chinese room experiment. And then we will have a guest lecture by Amanda Lund from the University of Tasmania. So welcome again. Today's topic, as you know, is embodiment. So if you remember, the last week we were discussing about the limits of the current approach. So today, with in a short presentation, but you have a very nice discussion on this. So this topic is well analyzed in Rolf's and Josh's book, How the Body Shapes the Way We Think. And in general, my lectures are intended as to give a basic scaffolding of a concept that you can then analyze, go deeper by yourself, and then those of you who are joining the koans may even go even deeper by trying to answer to our challenges. So so it's true that I already told before that the robotics, the building robots and the dreaming of artificial beings with an intelligence, a capability similar to those of humans is really very old. It seems that it's something very natural for us to fancy about these things. However, the artificial intelligence and robotics as serious scientific, as modern scientific areas of investigation and even academic disciplines are a few decades old. Actually, it is by convention we tend to consider that AI was born at a famous seminar which was held at Dartmouth College in 1956, and there were all those people that later on became the famous founding fathers, interestingly founding fathers of AI. And if you look in this old picture, for example, you have a young Noam Chomsky. One of the people really starting the scientific and technological enterprise of AI was McCarthy. Then you have Miller. So there are a number of people, and basically it was a small seminar which was held at Dartmouth College in 1956. By the way, I met Rolf, so my friend Rolf started in a seminar which was organized in Switzerland in 2006 to celebrate the the first 50 years of AI. And it was a nice celebration because as you see from the, it was actually not, because many times you organize this kind of events as really formal and sometimes even a bit boring initiatives, you know, where you say, oh, we are so good, thank you to our. In that case, it was nice because it was clear that there is a lot of ideas under development, and there is a really very lively community. And now, 12 years later, so the AI has really become a topic for discussion in the mass media. Actually, I say that conventionally, we say that AI started in 1956 at the Dartmouth College in the US seminar. But, for example, Alan Turing was already studying actually the possibility of building artificial intelligence. This was actually a consequence of the fact that at the end of World War II, a number of electromechanical computers were built. And this made the people working on that stuff think that in principle, this had been, for instance, had been actually in the air for some time. It was possible to build a system with the capability to emulate intelligent behaviors. And what we were seeing last time, whatever an intelligent behavior should be, you know, because as I think that the carry-on message of last lecture was, okay, be cautious about what you define as intelligent behavior. So the conclusion was that we should not look at a definition of intelligence in general, but to study analytically different behaviors and to see how it is possible to mechanize them, to build an algorithm or a system. Because if we think that real intelligence has to be embodied, we will need to build a robot to study intelligence. But without getting trapped in the attempt to give a general definition, because as we have seen, it is not easy. I thought that for sure a mechanical computer was designed by Babbage already at the end of the 19th century. You know that the very first computer programmer is considered to be Ada Lovelace. Again, same age of Charles Babbage in Victorian UK. What we missed was a systematic approach. What Charles Babbage machine and modern VLSI machine or GPUs or whatever computing platform is the fact that they are state machine. Is something that I tend to repeat many times. So they are typical example of clockworks. And and also the electromechanical computers that were built at the end and after the end of World War II were kind of big clocks, just faster, much, and now extremely exponentially faster. So Turing, in a famous article that you can find easily on the web, and if you are interested, I can send you the reference. The title is basically is Can Machine Think? So he wrote a famous, and in that article he proposed, okay, I can send you the exact reference, now I'm missing, but the problem is, it really starts with the question, can we build a machine which is able to think? And his answer was yes. And as an anecdote, which actually tells a lot about how you can underestimate challenges in science and technology, there is a famous phrase, not less famous phrase, where he says, considering that now we were able to build a computer with 1 megabyte memory, we should not be far away from building a real intelligent machine. So we were so happy to be able to build one of those early electromechanical computers with 1 megabyte, 1 mega is not a mistake, it's 1 megabyte of memory. They thought that they were clearly underestimating the needed the capability, not in terms of organization of process, but what real brute force, what you need to build a human level intelligence. Apart from that, he basically proposed what has been then called the Turing Machine. So actually, the contribution by Turing were the Turing game, the imitation game, it's called Turing test, the Turing Machine, and actually is less known for other work that he did, I think in 1951, where actually he was showing how from certain kind of continuous process, reaction, diffusion processes can emerge patterns. And actually, it seems that he thought that that was the way to go. And actually, he was also pointing to the fact that an intelligent machine should be able to learn. But what the Turing machine that we are talking about now is referring to is giving a model of a general computing machine, which is important because it's the beginning of computation theory. So you need, if you wanted to understand what a computer can do or not in practice, you need to have an abstract model of a computer. And this abstract model that I don't describe in detail is a long stripe with letters, with a group of letters giving the program to the head, which moves on the stripes doing what is written in the program. And of course, it's also, so basically, you give a set of instructions, which is move a tape. For example, if you look at the CL1, the third input for the tape, it's move left by 1 position. CR2 is move right by 2 position. But what is in, and so you can write on the stripe, on the tape, what you want by giving a program. So the point is that really this could be another interesting topic for a student presentation. So the idea is that my program says how my writing head and move on a long tape. And in this way, I can write and delete and change whatever I want. This, in essence, is what every Turing machine is able to do. Actually, I tended to, and then writing this in terms of a clock, a system of gears pulling and other mechanisms like the famous Ginevra wheels or things. No, there are a number of mechanisms that are used in clocks. Typical clock, or if you implement them like they did in Turing times, on an electromechanical platform, or if you put it on a massive multiprocessor architecture like we do in any server farm of Google or Facebook or many places. So it doesn't matter. What you basically do is having a set of prescribed actions, and on the Turing machine is really so before scribed written instruction, and then following those instructions, you can compute any computable function. Because this is the other point. So the claim is that a Turing machine can compute any computable function. And here in certain sense, when you stay into the algorithm domain, so any algorithm that you can write will be very similar to the program that you can run on a Turing machine. So the Turing machine is basically the essence of computing machinery. So is the basic hardware. It's actually conceptual hardware, so it's a thought experiment, where you can run any algorithm. Then if some of you for sure know that there is a lot of work that has been done starting from there to discuss, for example, how many steps of computing you need to sort a list of numbers, and critically, how with which function of a number of elements in the array that you want to put in order to sort, if it go up with linearly or quadratically. So because it's something very critical, because if you wanted to size a computer to understand if a computer is okay from what you want to do, you need to have some indication about how the problem scales, so how the number of computing steps that an ideal computing machinery will have to perform to solve your problem. And my idea is I promised you that to talk a bit about the difference between chess and Go. And you will see that basically what changes is what is called the space program, the space dimension. So the problem space dimensions, which in the case of Go are much bigger than in chess, where they are already big. So this idea by Turing, that as though also had other ideas, like that of the emergence of patterns from reaction diffusion processes, actually gave rise to was the beginning of functionalism, because the idea here, and I was somehow pushing this idea before, is that actually it doesn't matter if your program runs on a brain or a computer, on a mechanical computer, or as Hilary Putnam, the famous American philosopher, said, or on Swiss cheese, because it's the logic which matters, not the hardware. As this functionalist idea, I told you that I like to underline this, because after the idea that was more, because you may have many ideas, some ideas are spread, are shared in a large community, some other ideas are not. And of the ideas, the main, I'm oversimplifying, but this is a lie. No? But of the three, he had more, but of the three big ideas by Turing, what the community developed more in the first decades of AI were the ideas related to the Turing machine and the Turing test, the imitation game. The idea of the emergence of patterns from complex continuous processes, and the idea that learning is a characteristic distinctive, functional, necessary characteristic of any intelligent system has been more less accepted, with while learning has had waves of popularity, and it's now extremely learning. So now many people even confuse AI and machine learning, or even deep learning. So today, when you talk about AI in the media, typically people talk about, think about some machine learning of learning system. While for many decades, the approach that was prevalent was the approach which is actually in this picture is apparent. It was to build algorithms to solve symbolic reasoning problems. And typically This is a very early example. They are much more sophisticated now, but the idea is that you have a language. Instead of having if A is greater than 2, and B is equal C, you have primitives in your language which are put block A on table TA, because you may have and you basically with this kind of primitives you solve the problem, and it is possible. An old example was the Hanoi Tower. So a typical early success of AI was the Hanoi Tower, solving the Hanoi Tower problem, which is putting blocks in order. This is what something people call as good old-fashioned artificial intelligence, which gives the acronym GOFAR. And if you look to one of the basic handbook defining the field of what we now call classical AI, is artificial intelligence, a modern approach by Russell and Norvig. And basically, what we are talking is about problem solving, knowledge about reasoning, learning, but learning in a different way from what we end. This is something that we will see in a coming lecture. And communicating, perceiving, and acting. So, for example, the typical problem of grasping a pen in a classical AI view is that the idea is that first I see that this is a pen. Then I see where is my hand. Then I plan a trajectory to reach the pen, and then I will have a plan to grasp it. Actually, where this has been extremely successful is, I think, an example that almost everybody uses, like Google. Google is a typical early, is AI from the 90s, basically. Games. So again, I will come back on this, but what is games like chess or even Go, which are games which are called perfect information games, because every player knows during the play the exact state of a game. So if you think about in chess or Go, you look at the board, and you immediately can check where are all the pieces, or whether, and this is true for draw, is true for chess, it is true for draw, but it's not true, for example, in poker. So in poker, you know what you are, the cards which are in your hand, but you don't know your opponent's cards. So you know how many cards exist, and you can estimate the probability that your opponents have certain. Actually, good card players are people who have a good statistic feeling, and so they can guess which cards are their opponents at the end. If you think about this is a very ideal situation because, for example, we don't know. So just to go very high level, for example, Trump doesn't know what Iran is planning. And then there is not. So it's not the kind of game where an AI like that playing Go could be used if not for reference, for giving a rough idea. Because in general, also social. If you go down in every, this is a kind of eyebrow social interaction, but even when you are talking with someone on a metro, you don't know what this person is actually thinking, or where he's going, what happened in his lifetime before or her lifetime before. So actually, most of the games where we are involved are not perfect information games, and this is where is typically where the AI development until now has been a bit weak. A weakness that is now that machine learning has been more developed is less, it's starting to fill in the gap. So I'm not saying, this is impossible, we will never do it. We are doing progress. So perfect information games, even with very large space, so very large alternative possibility of gaming, are good for AI, in particular if you use a more modern approach based on learning and massive simulation. What is still very difficult is the interaction with a human and the real world. And basically, because the world is far from a perfect, acting in the real world is far from playing a perfect information game. So we, in our culture, we value a lot of being a good chess player. So you have a lot of consideration for good, because for us humans it's difficult to play chess. Like it is, you need to learn to mathematics or engineering, because I mean, our intelligence developed to grasp apples on the trees. So we are very good in interacting with the environment. We are very good in reading our intentions, so we are good in social interaction. We are not very good in doing the same job, the same task again and again with the same precision, for example. It is one of the reasons why working on in a factory, maybe not now, but decades ago, was boring, because people had to do the same operation again and again for many hours. And we are not designed, so our organization is not for that. So we have the Turing Machine, or as they are implemented in modern computers, and we have that are typical logical machines, state machines. So ordered, the example with the Turing Machine is very, so it's a set of prescribed, so written before actions to be executed. This is not how we work. We work in a stochastic way with an behaviors which emerge from and embody system. I'm of course running out of time, because if you so again, these lectures are meant to stimulate you to learn more by yourself, to read, but a limit in the approach that we have seen before of we can say, to abstract the problems to putting a block on another one requires that I already had put label on the blocks. And unfortunately, if you you don't have these labels on the objects that you see. For example, if you have a camera, they are not labeled on telling you what is this. So, like in this cartoon, a house, a dog, a cat. This is something that needed to be abstracted. No? So you can, when you have put the labels, then you can reason. And this problem is actually what show to be weak with respect to the external world, because luckily the situation is evolving fast, but the typical problem, the very successful learning system that has been developed so far, the more successful, then there are other more recent developments that might be in our direction. Is that it's supervised learning, which means that someone has to put tags. So someone write on the door, this is the door. And typically when you have a system working on images, for example, they are tagged images. So images where some human has put, this is an house, this is a cat, this is a dog. And in this way, the difficult task is made again by humans. So an approach that started from this kind of failures, which are more apparent in robotics. So when you deal with the real world in a non-preset situation, has led to embodiment concept. No? Because, and a very typical example is the example of the summer center on the beach. No? Because if you look at on the beach or on any terrain, no? If you look at an ant moving from point A to point B, you see that it does very strange things, a very complex trajectory. But what it really does is that it avoids obstacles and adapt to the terrain. So if you want to think about you should think to an ant 1,000 times bigger. It would follow a different trajectory. So the complexity, because the point here, this is called stigmergy. So the complexity of the behavior of an ant is in part due to the end, and please notice that this stupid animal has already several 10,000 of neurons. But most of the complexity of the behavior that we observe in the ant movement is actually due to the terrain, to reacting to the structure of an environment. So this is the famous frame of reference reference issue. So putting the labels on things and actually define the frame of reference. And also, so this is I'm stretching a bit of a concept, but this is typically the reason why an approach, a functionalist approach, but even more many approaches fail because the frame of reference changes. So if you know in advance the world where your system needs to operate, you can prescribe what the system will have to do. If you don't know in advance the form of the ground where the garden where your robotics hand is going to work, you cannot, you have serious difficulty to foresee everything in advance. We will see when we will discuss the net Freud experiment. So now maybe I will continue next time because I'm going out of time. But the main idea of the embodiment approach is that part of the intelligent behavior actually comes from the environment and the body structure. The example of how ants work is typical because the trajectory is actually defined by the terrain and the reactions that depends on the body shape. Actually, already several years ago, Fumiya Ida, now is in Cambridge, when he was in Zurich, built this puppy robot, which was able to walk, even run like a robot on a treadmill, basically without any programming or very limited programming, just putting some springs on this structure that you see in the picture. So and this is, if you wish, is I will finish here for today. This is this is idea. This is an article in Science that you can find, which is a kind of putting in a systematic form of what I was saying freely, right? In free form, because the idea is that, and here you see the difference with the so-called mechatronic approach, because in the very essence, the mechatronic, what we have called the mechatronic paradigm, which is informing the DARPA challenge, humanoids robots, for example, is that you have a machine with some actuators. So you have some electric drives, electric motors, and then we have wires to connect the electric motors to what in essence is a Turing machine. So a general computation machine. So you don't have the blue part of this picture. While the embodied AI approach, first of all, focus not only on abstract computing machinery performing logical tasks or even recognizing pictures, but assumes that you need to be able to react and interact in the real world. This is the first thing. The second thing is that part, like in this activity, because when I grasp, I do this example many times, but when I grasp this object, I don't plan the trajectory. I let fall my arm, and only at the very end I close it. I close it on the pen. And this is exploiting the body dynamics. This is also what we humans do in walking. And another thing, which is apparent in the case of the ant, and even in the Simon's example of the ant, is the environment. We will come back on this, but this picture is, in essence, what we mean as an embodied AI. And now since as usual I took too much time, I suggest to if you don't have some urgent question or doubt, I would like to pass the floor to people in Xi'an. So anytime, if you have questions, please feel free to send me by email or by chat. You have my and please accept my apologies for taking too much time. But really focus on this last scheme, because that's the essence of what we are saying. We say that there is not just the brain and the body, not the brain, the program in the brain or the Swiss cheese or whatever, and the body completely disconnected, and the environment that we recognize, and then, but we think that the whole system has to work as a system. So part of the control is in the brain, part of what is done is in the body, and part comes from the environment. So this is a significant departure from the classical paradigm. And now I'm very, very happy to pass the floor to Xi'an, where a group of students will will show us the Chinese room experiment. So Xi'an, the floor is yours. You can share.
Hello, are you?
Yes, yes.
Can you see the share screen here?
Yes, I can hear.
Can you see the screen here?
You can share, yes. If you go down in your screen, you have a share button. We did this test. If you go down in your screen, you should find there is a list of actions, and one is share. It is green. Yes, I think you found it.
Okay, finish the presentation, okay?
Yes, okay.
Today, we are going to talk about an important thought experiment in the development of artificial intelligence, the Chinese room experiment. And we intend to present our content, the following aspects. In the first part, we will introduce the author and the background of the experiment. And in the second part, we will have a brief description of the experiment. And in the third part, we will list some questions and arguments raised by the experiment. And in the first part, we will show our thoughts and views. The first part, the author and background. The Chinese room experiment was first proposed by Johnson, an American philosopher. In his paper, Minds, Brains, and Programs, which is published in Behavioral and Brain Science in 1980. The argument is intended to refute a prediction called strong AI, which holds the opinion that if appropriately programmed, a computer can have the same intelligence as human beings. The second part, description of the experiment. So, suppose that himself, who knows nothing about Chinese, is in a closed room with only a slot. There is a book with an English version of the computer program, as well as a large number of Chinese characters. There are also sufficient papers, pencils, and erasers in the room. So, to receive Chinese characters through a slot in a phone, process them according to the program's instructions, and produce Chinese characters as output. The girl outside may be convinced that the person in the room has the ability to speak and understand Chinese, but that's not the case. The third part, some questions and arguments. The question that Saul wants to answer with this experiment was, consisting of the whole room and the machine, does this machine really understand Chinese? Or it just simulates the ability to understand Chinese? So, call the first prediction strong AI and the latter big AI. So, assert that there is no essential difference between the roles of the computer and himself in the experiment. However, Saul will not be able to understand the proposition because he doesn't know any English characters. Therefore, he argues computers don't have the intelligence to understand Chinese characters either. But some opponents argue that human intelligence comes from the activity of neurons in the brain. As individual neurons, they don't know what each word means. But human beings show the intelligence of understanding and communication. So the fact that people in the Chinese room can't understand Chinese doesn't mean that the Chinese room as a whole don't have the intelligence to understand Chinese characters. The first part, our thoughts and views. After our discussion on the issue, we feel that the root cause of this debate lies in the following two problems. The first problem: what's the human mechanism for understanding things? And the second problem: what is the mechanism of human consciousness? As we all know, when we attend a question, we first need to understand the question, and then we need to think about the content of the problem. And finally, we will describe the result of thinking in the form of language or words. But when a computer obtains the same question, the process goes like the right pictures. The computer processes the inputs through the determined rules given by the program, and thus giving the output. And in other words, the program itself is a result of human intelligence. By comparing how humans and computers answer the same question, we can see that the program computer used to give the answer is just a simple simulation of the human process of understanding and thinking, but simulation is not equivalent. Therefore, we believe that before human understanding mechanisms and consciousness mechanisms are fully understood, the intelligence demonstrated by the computers we have built is just a simple simulation of some certain aspects of human capability. And the intelligence that computers exhibit is different from the intelligence of human beings. And so we call it machine intelligence. Okay, that's all of our content. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you. I guess if there are some questions. So if there are no questions, I pass the floor to Amanda Lund from the University of Tasmania in Australia, Hobart, Australia. So Amanda, nice to see you. The floor is yours.
Thanks, Fabio. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes.
I can hear me clearly too. I'll just close this door, excuse me. Bit of feedback. Great, now I need to share my screen. This will, okay, continue.
Okay.
That's my slide.
It worked. So we can see and you can hear, so you can.
Okay. Thanks, Fabio, for the opportunity to speak with everyone here on things that I've been thinking about recently, I suppose. My name's Amanda Lunt. That was Lunt, not Lunt. Good English name, apparently. My family has been here for a few generations. So where's here? I just need to move this so I can see my thing. I'm at the University of Tasmania, which strangely enough is in Tasmania. I'm based in Launceston, which is a small city of about 70,000 people. The University of Tasmania is unique in Australia in that it covers the whole of Tasmania. So we have 3 campuses. The largest one is in Hobart, which is the capital of our state, and there's a little one in the northern seaside town of Burnie. So, in case you don't know where Tasmania is, you're not alone. The person who did this map of Australia apparently doesn't know where Tasmania is either. It's actually beneath Melbourne, so we're a little island in the south of the globe, pretty close to Antarctica. We don't mind in Australia being put sort of top centre on occasion.
So that's
someone's
the center of the world.
So depending on your perspective, we could be there. Okay, and of course on planet Earth. So I'm just going to have a look at some concepts of ontology. You may or may not be familiar with the term. I certainly wasn't when I went through my undergraduate, because I didn't do a philosophy undergraduate. So ontology is the study of what is there. It is also the study of the most general features of what there is and how the things they are relate to each other. It is also the study of ontological commitment, what we or others are committed to. And there's also meta-ontology. I'm only interested in the first three just for the purposes of this quick presentation. So we're thinking about what there is, the most general features of what there is and how they relate to each other, and how we commit to that. Just to explain what I meant when I gave a subtitle of ontology is not a dirty word. I always like an excuse to toss in a bit of an obscure pop reference. In the 1970s in Australia, which, to give a secret away, is the decade I was born, there was a glam rock band here called the Skyhooks, and they released a song called Ego is Not a Dirty Word. So I took the liberty of superimposing the word ontology over every use of theirs of the word ego. So I've ended up with ontology is not a dirty word. And the reason I've done this is just to demonstrate that it's a pretty fundamental concept, and it's also a very simple concept. But we just have, if I did not have an ontology, I would not be here tonight. If I did not have an ontology, I might not think that I was right. If you did not have an ontology, you might not care the way you dressed. If you did not have an ontology, you'd just be like the rest. Ontology is not a dirty word. So moving on from that, a little bit about me. I am a sessional teacher here in the School of ICT, which means I teach during semester, and in between semesters I get an opportunity to research. And at the moment I'm researching into organisational resilience and how we might be able to measure that through a computational framework. You may or may not be familiar with the term resilience. This diagram is an attempt to explain it, or one version of it simply. So we have, I don't know if you can see down the bottom, I can't see it on my screen, but the arrow pointing to that round ball says the system. So in this diagram, we're considering our organisation as a system that has a usual way of operating. It's daily set of operations, and it sits very comfortably in that space in the bottom of our little dip there. Things happen on occasion that are outside of the scope of our daily operations, and quite often they're unexpected and they can be very dramatic. And if our organisation responds to this challenge in a resilient way, it will, the way this picture works is our system will go up towards a threshold or tipping point. If there's a resilient response, it will cause the system to come back down into its normal operation. If the resilient response isn't sufficient, the system will reach a threshold, go over this tipping point, and end up in a different operating space. That's the theory of resilience. So there are difficulties for me with researching resilience in the wild. So there are many definitions of resilience. It's a very large concept and very difficult to hang on to, as in grasp as a concept, quite slippery. There's this notion of survivor bias, which, so say you have a bunch of organisations in an earthquake-prone area. They're expecting an earthquake at some point, but you don't know when, and then a big earthquake hits. Some organisations survive and some don't. So a researcher would go in and look at the organisation that survived and says, okay, well, so what is it about this organisation that makes it...
You may have the microphone too close to your mouth because we have some
feedback. How's that?
Again, say something.
I did. Can you hear that?
Now it's a bit closer because now it's not, it's weak.
Can you hear that? How does that sound?
Okay. Okay, sorry for interruption.
That's okay. I will quickly, this is a good demonstration. I'm probably not explaining survivor bias too well, but this is the idea. You shoot the bullets and then you draw the target after you've shot the bullets. That's kind of the idea of, I've got a message here saying screen sharing has stopped, so I don't know if you could actually see that. Okay, let's, can you see that? Fabio, anybody? Can you see my screen?
No, I can't. Try to share again.
Zoom, share.
Yes, now, now it's okay. Sorry
Okay.
for the interruption, so I disrupted.
No, well, it's much better if you interrupt me than let me keep going.
I'm very good at that.
Okay, so nutshell, there's major issues with researching resilience. So another important thing, resilience is triggered. It's this idea that it's an automatic response of an organisation, but is it desirable? Do we perhaps want our organisation to switch into a new state or operating state? Problems with experiment design and the need for context. That's just context about me. So I find myself feeling like I'm trying to catch a concept that every time I look at it, it just slips out of view, which can be extremely frustrating. So I feel like I'm chasing my tail sometimes. So I've spent a bit of time thinking about different strategies for catching a tail. And they generally fall into these sorts of categories. We've got, you can try and go for it over your right shoulder than your left shoulder. You can pretend to ignore it. Maybe you can sneak up on it later. Or of course, you can try and get someone else to do it for you. But regardless, what am I going to do when I catch that tail? It's just a big problem. So moving into a bit of context of why I'm talking about resilience of organisations. So as these lectures will reveal to you quite clearly, robotics research is hard. Progress seems slow and concepts can be really difficult to hold on to. You think you've got a handle on something and then whoop, there it goes, like you're chasing your own tail. So I have a question, and maybe we can test the technology and see if this works. If anyone would like to tell me what a robot is. Fabio, would you be able to, or do I unmute people? I don't mind my notes. I should hide those. My screen sharing is paused. Brush, yes, I can. I couldn't hear that.
Perhaps a robot is, well, sort of a machine that possesses some developed artificial intelligence and is able to interact functionally with the environment around it. Like, I guess that's kind of vague, but maybe that works.
The environment sounds good to me. Anybody else? Couldn't catch that one. Is that Xian?
Someone is talking. Xian? Xian, were you trying to say something? No, I don't know. No, maybe it's just. I told you that. So anyway, now everybody is unmuted. So no, please go ahead.
The robots in my mind, and I think it should have its own body. In other words, it is embodied and it can adapt itself. It has the intelligence, but adapt itself to.
Could you get it? Okay.
Does that seem to match what that last one was?
Yes, I think so.
It works in the rivers and oceans in China. The machine is designed by the graduate from our university. The machine can automatically clean the water in the river and ocean.
I didn't get much of that. It was a bit soft. I got designed though, I think. All right. Are there any more? I think I should probably.
Robots maybe can communication with me or. Can you hear me? It may be communicate with me or a person or any other animals. Maybe it has a shape of person. Maybe it can smile or maybe it can understand my smile or my emotion. Or some robots can help a person to do some jobs like clean their house or maybe it can listen to me to help me to do some jobs just like that. Okay.
Beautiful. Okay, that's a nice mix. Perhaps next time we do this, I might ask you to email it first, and I'll make the slide. But that's fantastic. So we're starting to get a bit of a diversity in view there. Can I continue, Fabio?
Yes, yes.
So just so I don't keep everyone too late. So I'll just save that. So that's really good. Thank you, everyone. So I'll just leave that and move on, and we might refer back to that. So there was, I think the first one, certainly a couple of them referred to environment. So a robot, the idea of it moving through an environment. And that's a really important thing to think about, and it's a really important aspect of our ontological commitment. Okay, why is this? I'll keep moving through. So I've got a quote here that's attributed to Marshall McLuhan. He wrote extensively on technology in the 20th century. He's not the first person to talk about fish in water, and he's not the last person to talk about fish in water. It's a really good analogy for us. This quote, "One thing about which fish know exactly nothing is water, since they have no anti-environment which would enable them to perceive the element they live in." So it's just food for thought for us. What is it about our environment that we don't perceive, that we take for granted? So moving on to this concept of ontological commitment, there's many ways to categorise ontologies, but I've just got these three pretty straightforward perspectives. So there's an idealist, an empiricist, and a realist ontology. And within each of these, there is a wide variety. So these are just really broad categories. So an idealist ontological commitment would say that no entities exist independent of the human mind. And you, I am sure, would be familiar with various science fiction perspectives on this. I think The Matrix is a common example of the idea that we might be living inside some simulation. So that's one example of an idealist ontological commitment. The empiricist looks at mind-independent entities that exist are those that can be directly observed. So that's including sight or some other way of perceiving, but it's an empiricist ontology is related to perception. And everything else, so things that we can't perceive, such as electrons or viruses, are theoretical constructs that are helpful to make sense of that which we can directly observe. And the realist ontology would say that many types of entities exist autonomously, so that's outside of the human mind, even if they are not directly given to our senses. Okay, so I'll move on from that. So I just have a little thought experiment, because this is kind of where I'm wallowing around at the moment in my research. And I just have a proposal for you that our organisations, so our businesses, our governments, our anything that you can think of as nations, as human organisations, are actually cybernetic organisms, and AI is already here. So what is a cybernetic organism? So you might have heard of cyborg, which is a shortening of cybernetic an organism, and it's a fusion between an organic material and technology, or it can be a technological fusion between two otherwise separate organic materials. So when we think about our organisations, we have, so our accountants would talk about it as plant and equipment. So we have our hardware, I suppose, and then we have our software, which are us, that come in and actuate that hardware and make it do things. So if that's the case, so like I said, this is just a thought experiment. Where is the entity? So we have our businesses are legal entities. We know we can become owners in our businesses by buying shares on them. They float on stock exchanges. We know they collapse and we can have great repercussions, shockwaves felt throughout the world. But where does it actually exist? And this is where our use of ontology and different ways of looking at things comes in handy. Commonly we talk about tech organisations, but it's not so common that we talk about organisations themselves as technology. So I don't have any major points to make on that slide. I just wanted to draw those to your attention. That's it. So robots as tools. So this started to come in our discussion a little earlier. I think the last person, there were a couple that I didn't quite catch. But this idea of a robot that can do something for us. And certainly in the culture that I've grown up in, this long-standing tragedy of the mechanical man is just in books, in film. So we have examples of the Terminator, for example, or if you're familiar with the Wizard of Oz, the Tin Man there that didn't have a heart. They're two examples I can think. I suppose Frankenstein is almost an example there, but there always seems to be coupled with this thing that we are trying to create in our image, but can never quite, you know, bridge the gap. That's it. And I thought just with resilience, for some reason, I decided to bring that back in here, just to say that resilience can be considered as an emergent property of a complex self-adaptive system. So as you work through the material, particularly in this subject, you will not be able to escape the concept of emergence. Keep an eye out for it. So emergent properties, things like intelligence or cognition or consciousness, considering things in those contexts is another example of an ontological commitment. So when you are reading these sorts of things, just think, what is this saying about the way things are? So there are some other ways we can consider robots. These are just some thoughts. We consider robots as evidence. Evidence of what? Evidence of the way we believe things are at the moment, perhaps. Blueprints, prototypes. Prototypes of what? What are we trying to create? Proposals. Explorations. Robots as explorations and reflections. So if we take then robotics as exploration, exploration of things like ethics, of politics, the way we interact with each other, of the way things are, of the concept of future and of possibilities. Even robotics as an exploration of what it means to be human. So I just leave you with this thought. What impact does your concept of environment, so the one that you have in your brain at the moment, have on the choices that you make for your robot? Is the environment out there? Is it in here? Are we limiting what our robots can perceive or our perception of what our robots achieve? And that's it in a nutshell. I'd love to have conversations about this. I have, if you're interested also, I have plenty of references to point you towards. Please feel encouraged to email me at any time. And I just wanted to point out that when I started on my research journey, I was very much in an empirical ontology, and I didn't know it. But so I've got my first two papers ever published have both got empirical in the title. So yeah, thanks. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So maybe there are a few questions. Okay, I've unmuted everybody for the questions, so we get all the random noises. But, well, actually, it's not a question, but a comment. I find very interesting this idea of studying the resilience of an organization as an embodied intelligence.
Yeah, it's
stretching the concept.
Thank you. Yeah, I was chasing my tail a lot with that slide where I showed the like the problems with survivor bias and all that sort of things. So much of that is empirically based problem, and it wasn't until I took on board this notion of embodied cognition and what that means for our organisations was I able to crack a few nuts there. So.
It's very interesting. I like your take on ontology.
Yes.
Yeah, because it's true. Ontology, for example, myself, I tend to think that ontology is a dirty word. But no, it's a joke.
Oh, it's
you know,
certainly...
we are as a continental philosophers.
Oh.
It's a joke.
I'm a need-to-know basis, so I hear of all these grand debates that are going on, and I'm lost. I don't really know. So I just like to take notice of when I'm assuming things, and yeah, I find Manuel Delander, I'm not sure how to say him. I think he's very useful in this space. Very clear.
It's true, because we use a lot of words many times with different meanings, and this is I don't know if, but anyway, thank you. No, it's so of course we will publish the PDF. So you will send me the PDF, and we will put it on the website. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Amanda, for her great talk, actually, and also for getting some reaction from the audience. And so see you next Thursday. Bye, everybody. Bye bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye bye. Bye, everybody. Bye bye.